Welcome to Self-Help Book Club. We read self-help books and see if they help. The Karma of Success by Liz Tran is another spiritual career self-help book, which I know I'm still reeling over the Sacred Success episode, but this one came recommended by Claire Parker of the Celebrity Memoir Book Club, so I went in hoping for the best. Karma of Success explores how to connect with your intuition and higher self, which Liz calls your inner genius, and connects that intuitive process with ambition and financial success. She references Zen Buddhism, Taoism, Reiki, and astrology to guide readers in a pretty explicitly corporate way. The Karma of Success actually starts the exact same way as Sacred Success, with this old Zen story about a Zen master pouring tea into a cup and saying you need to return with an empty cup in order to learn. This book will only work if you give yourself over to capitalist Buddhism, etc. But Liz differs from Barbara in a pretty key way. She's not a white Nepo baby. Liz Tran is a woman of color, self-made, and she's put in a lot of time both into her business career and her path as a healer and coach. A lot of this book is stuff I've seen before, but it's all good stuff. A lot about the value of gratitude, affirmations, journaling, manifesting, cleanse your energy, protect your peace, set boundaries, list activities that bring you joy and incorporate that into your day. I like that one a lot. Cleanse, protect, and amplify your energy. Release control, release perfectionism. Embrace acceptance and compassion for yourself. Reframe your problem solving. What's happening for me versus what's happening to me? My timing is always right. What if I have everything I need? How would that change my perspective? I trust my intuition. I nurture my inner genius, abundance mindset, etc., etc. I really liked the book's encouragement to embrace different aspects of yourself, even if it doesn't seem to align with what people want or expect you to be. Liz Tran really encourages you to get to know yourself, take personality quizzes, find out what makes you you. She talks about her own challenge to embrace her spiritual, earnest side. She was compartmentalizing herself to survive in the corporate world, but found that she was actually most successful when she embraced her full self. I relate to that a lot as someone who took on the identity of comedian, and am most known for that, but I'm a lot of other things other than a silly person. I'm sincere and spiritual and sensitive. Today's episode is apparently brought to you by the letter S, but in this studio, I'm trying to be more myself. That being said, a lot of people are fully themselves and fail in this world, but they don't usually write books about that. On a more general note about self-help, I'm realizing how much all of these books kind of blatantly rip each other off, paraphrasing other self-help books without crediting them. Maybe it's unintentional, maybe it's intuitive, maybe it's hacky advice, but I wonder as I read these books if they're aware of the other books they sound like. Like, the more of them I read, like, oh, this is from the Artist's Way, this is the Bible. Maybe it happens organically, like you get advice from your friend Greg, but he doesn't tell you where you got the advice from, so you write it down, put it in your book, and say, as my friend Greg once said, turn the other cheek. Again, that's more a note about all self-help books than just this one, but I'll try to assume everyone has good intentions and hope people credit others if they know what I know. After reading this book, I'm thinking a lot more about how to keep taking the next right step with my own goals, We all have that little voice inside of us, whether we call it the inner child or our inner artist or our inner genius. It's that part of us that may have something exciting for us in mind if we listen to what it has to say. My guest today is Claire Parker, a book club queen, co-host of Celebrity Memoir Book Club podcast. Let's see what she has to say about the karma of success.
It's also, I feel like at different points in your life, like different things can hit.
Yeah.
I feel that way about even like fiction books that I'm like, I don't know, it didn't resonate with me today. And 4 years from now or 4 years before now, maybe it would have been like a life-changing book. You never know like what you're looking for.
Yeah. But you picked this book. What brought you to this one in particular?
I was recommended it specifically by somebody that I generally like trusted her recommendations, so I was interested. I am at a point in my life right now where I'm very open to a self-help, specifically a creative self-help, because I feel like I'm in a transition. And I think like more than anything, I'm looking for actionable exercises that can help get me to a place. And I feel like something I'm struggling with is I live a pretty authentic life. So I feel like the basics of like, well, what do you like? You know what I mean? I'm like, I need a next step.
Right. And this book had like an exercise like every 3 pages. So that was really,
Yeah,
must have been
when I
helpful.
was reading it, I didn't feel they were helpful for me just because, again, I think this was so corporate America.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it is that I'm looking for, and I don't know. I think maybe my larger problem that I'm getting from these books is that I have to stop thinking I'm an exception to every rule, and that's what
Right.
you know what I mean. I am like, Claire. Maybe if you stop saying, "Well, this doesn't work for me because my problems are solved," well, your problems aren't solved. So maybe you have to stop thinking that you're living this like creative, authentic path. Because
Right.
if you were, you wouldn't be looking for answers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it can be also like, this seems to be a book about getting success, like getting money. It's sort of almost like taking the opposite viewpoint of like someone trying to get in touch with their creativity. It's more it's almost like, all right, you are in touch with your creativity. Let that be lucrative. And you already are a person who's successful and knows how to make an idea into monetary, It seems like a lot of the advice, you've sort of already broken through those.
And I think the problem is that, like, actually in life, the same advice is always relevant. And so, like, my problem is that I'm lying. I feel like it's easy to be like what you just said. It'd be easy to say that and be like, look, you've like made a living doing something creative, but I am feeling frustrated and stuck. And I need to stop being like, this isn't relevant. Like, there are things that clearly I'm not letting myself doing. Before this, we were just talking about the artist's way. And I'm like, well, I'm already doing a very creative job. But like, I feel like in the last few weeks, I've decided like, I'm going to switch course a bit. And it's like, okay, well, clearly something in me was saying you're not allowed to do that next thing that you really want to do. It's weird how hard it can be to like recognize the obvious thing in front of you.
Yeah. It seems like what a lot of these books, and definitely this one, are about, like, this one calls it the inner genius. Sometimes they call it the higher self or the inner child or the inner artist. Different books say different things, but it seems like it's like trying to figure out what that part of you really wants. And it might surprise you. It could be a different type of art, or it could be like within your art, a different thing you want to say. Like, I know some of the books will like encourage you to really figure out what's making you emotional. Like, I remember a big one in the artist's way is jealousy. It was like, who are you jealous of? And
that is something that helps me a lot. I feel like in comedy is like really breaking down would I want to be doing what they're doing? Like
right.
and I feel like that's such a good indicator but then you have to really ask yourself, like, am I jealous of their day-to-day life?
Right. Or like if something makes you angry, like if there's something about the industry that makes you angry, like if something about the way like the comedy landscape makes you angry, it'll say like that anger is an arrow pointing you to what you want to do. Like, Mr. Rogers hated TV, but he got into TV because he was angry at it, because he saw it as a tool he could use. So sometimes even within what you're doing, it's like, oh, what is my inner voice? And this book ends with, it kind of sums up the whole book in 2 words, like, trust yourself.
Yeah.
And if you had to like sum it up, it's like what you want, best. Like, you can quote Buddhism all you want and reference this and that, but like in your little heart of hearts, there might be a whisper telling you, I want to do this. And it's saying like, yeah, that part of you is right.
Yes.
And I don't know. It seems like you've generated so much success for yourself. I really was curious, like, what that path was for you of even, when these, like, you have this very successful podcast, Celebrity Memoir Book Club, another book club. You can go listen to 5 seasons of it right now. But when you got these first inklings for these ideas years ago, what makes you trust that voice or say like, oh, that's just another one of the many ideas I get and I'm going to ignore it?
So funny that you say that because like now that I think about like what the directive was for why we started that podcast, that's clear why I'm like feeling trapped by it, because it was very much me and my co-host Ashley were stand-up comedians, and every stand-up comedian has to have a podcast. And it was this idea of like, we want to be doing stand-up. In order to get an audience for stand-up, you need to have a podcast, because if you build a podcast audience, then you can have a stand-up audience. And then at one point it was like, in order to build your podcast audience, then you need to start a TikTok for it. And then you have to build an, and the first thing we were ever successful on was TikTok. And it was like this really frustrating feeling of people would refer to us as TikTokers. And it felt so like, how did we get so far from the initial goal? And I felt really like embarrassed that we were thought of as TikTokers, because it's not how I wanted to be seen. But then all of my time and effort is going towards like building the TikTok with the hopes that it funnels to the podcast, with hopes that it funnels to comedy. And in doing so, the podcast did get successful, and it was fun and it was great to do. But then I like completely almost stopped doing comedy because I was so wrapped up in these other things. And then I'm sitting here feeling very like creatively frustrated. And when you ask like what was the voice in our head, like what we thought was, it was our third podcast, and we thought like, what is a niche that we could tap into and leverage to build a name? And it really, when people are like, oh, so you love celebrity memoirs? No. And it does make sense that like 5 years later, we were kind of trapped, not trapped. I don't want to say trapped. I feel very like, I mean, having a job where I hang out with my best friend all the time is so fun, and we do like laugh and have a lot of fun. But it was like, there was no like underlying true dream of being like, wouldn't it be great to analyze celebrity memoirs every day? It was like, how can we get our perspective and our voice elevated on like someone else's coattails? And I definitely think we're at a point now where I feel that we have like made enough of a name for ourselves that we need a new reason or something.
Right.
And like, you know, and I think like, why do I feel frustrated? It's so funny. It's like, well, what was the mission of this job? And it was like to get us to another point.
Yeah.
And now that I think about it clearly, I'm like, well, of course I feel a bit like sick of reading celebrity memoirs. That was never the love of the game. I wouldn't do it if it hadn't, like stand up, I obviously have been a failure at for 10 years and I'm still doing it. I do that no matter what. But like, if the podcast hadn't popped off, we wouldn't have kept doing it.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because aside from the existential crisis I'm having inside listening to you, because I'm like at the beginning of, I feel like I'm at the beginning of your goal from years ago of being like, I totally empathize in like a personal way with that. Oh, you have to make a podcast, and oh, it can't just be talking. It's got to be something, people want to hear about, and what do they want to hear about, and what do, and it all is supposed to feed back into your stand-up, and I definitely relate to that. But what's interesting is that even though you are not interested in celebrity memoirs, you did succeed at your goal of like building your brand and building you two are funny on the podcast, which shows that you're comedians, which then connects to, I imagine, you can tour, right? Like
yeah. And it's funny because we do stand up and I always feel like I'm holding people hostage. Like I'm like, you guys came to see the podcast or some offshoot of, and I think they enjoy it. I mean, if they don't, it's too bad. That was the goal. And I do think like in a way of like the trust yourself, like the thing that works is that we've always had authentically our own voice. Like it is our opinions and perspectives. So I think if you like the podcast, what you really do like is ultimately us, because it's so shaded through our lens. And in that way, and I think something I've been working on is trusting that and saying you're allowed to now take yourself and move on. You don't have to stay with and because I think we've done a lot of projects through the brand of celebrity memoirs, when in reality, like I've been working on having more faith that we're allowed to take actually the brand of our friendship and our perspective and our dynamic and move towards us and away from like using other famous people.
Yeah. Y'all now have your own celebrity, and you can trust that people want to hear what you have to say, and that maybe could be with that inner genius.
That's what I'm hoping. Yeah. And I feel like it took me a while to like recognize that I was even denying that to myself, that I was like living in this fear of being like, well, based on the podcast, what makes sense next? And I had this higher goal, and I was like making up all these weird kind of convoluted next steps for how to get there. And now I'm like, oh, well, you can just again pursue the thing you like, just pursue what you want to do. Talk about what you want to talk about in the way you want to talk about it and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like a lot of these exercises, where they're trying to get to the root of, is asking yourself those questions like, oh, what is the worst thing that can happen if I took all my money and did this with it, if I used it to build that, if I quit this and started doing that. And it's sort of like listing all that out and then allowing yourself to answer those
Yeah. Like, what is the
those
fear?
critics.
I even feel like something that I try to do as an exercise is whenever I feel like embarrassed about something, I always try to be like, specifically, who do I think will judge me? And then be like, do I even care about that person's opinion? Because very often there's just this like faceless group, or there's one specific person that you don't even like, and you're like,
Right.
oh, why am I letting, like, when you really try to write down in a list, like, name out the people you think are gonna give you shit for this, it's not even anyone really.
Yeah, I think about that about this podcast all the time because I'm just starting this. You're like the 5th episode, and I'm so afraid of being. It's the podcast kind of inherently becomes genuine because it's about helping yourself, and so I'm having on funny people, but they're all telling me like their real life that.
Well, it's like if you're looking for help, then like with yourself, and then something's
like,
coming. Like nobody's like at the top of their game reading self-help books.
But it's like we're sort of a lot of times not trying to be funny on the podcast, and even in the intro, like I'm finding myself not wanting to write jokes about something that feels sincere, and in being earnest, that's when I imagine like a critic, and then I'm like, who is it? Who am I? And it's always just like some comedian that's like kind of a mean guy.
And also not doing the work. I find somebody we always talk about who's a comedian is this guy who asked me to do a bar show I used to run that was well attended because of my podcast. He asked to do time on it. And then in the meantime, he showed up and he like made fun of, he really looked down on the concept of building an audience. And he was just like, you could tell he had a real comedy purist. So he's like, well, I'm still trying to like figure, and he's meanwhile like a touring comedian. Like he is somebody that I'm like, you just don't want to do the work and you don't want to fail. And I've actually seen you make attempts at doing stuff online. And instead of just, and I'm like, and here you are using my platform. For somebody who looks down on it, you had no problem asking to use it.
Yeah. And these people, they're mean and they're haters. Like ultimately, like if I am making content for haters and to prove myself to them, then the people I'm actually trying to reach are going to get less out of whatever I'm putting out there.
And also the truth is like, if they could, they would.
Yeah.
Like that, why wouldn't you want to have 1 million followers on? Why wouldn't you want to do I mean, look at what's his name, Matt Rife. At the end of the day, he sold out Radio City Music Hall like 8 times in a row. That's not your. If you could put up 1 or 2 clips a week and then do Radio City Music Hall 8 times in a row, you would do that. You just can't.
Yeah.
Self-help book club. Something I did like about this book, I pulled a couple of quotes specifically because I found that I like a tough love, and every once in a while she would be like, if you're upset about this, it's because you're unhappy about that. And I was like, yes, you're right. Thank you for yelling at me. I do think these are true.
Well, do you have your quotes
I have a couple
ready to go?
This was a friend's book, so I wasn't able to write in it, but I pulled them up. Okay. One quote is, when we fixate too much on the right timeline or the perfect process, it's because we're not happy with who we are in the moment. We do not feel enough for whatever reason and reach out for comfort that we're at least on the right path. And I find that can be really true, especially like I'm 32. I feel like I know a lot of people turning 30, and there's a lot of things like, are these lining up? I also had seen like a self-help activity one time that I thought was good, which was basically like, what's your dream life in 10 years? What are all your accomplishments? And then it's like, okay, now how do you feel each day doing those things? And I find that very helpful because a lot of like, I've definitely been in positions now on a very, very minor scale where I'm living what I thought the dream was. And I'm like, this fucking sucks. Like touring is something that had always been my goal. When I started stand-up, I thought my dream was to be a touring stand-up comedian. And now I can't think of a worse life. Right. I cannot think of a worse day-to-day than building a life I love in New York City, only to leave it for 4 days a week, to be alone in the shittiest hotel, in the shittiest town. Oh, like I hate airports. I like routine. I like community. I don't even necessarily want to be doing comedy outside of New York. It turns out like I don't really feel a need to build a true career out of comedy. I feel like that's something that I've been lucky to discover by accident, is that I actually think I would have been very unhappy if the thing that I do love doing became my income source because of the stress it would have put on it. I'm happy to like have it as like an honest to God hobby almost. And so I feel like something that helps me when you think about like, what is it that you want? That's like a timeline thing. What is that life every day that you want to achieve? And I used to say like, I'm so lucky because when I was like 24, 25, my dream day was like to wake up, work out, go to my day job, and then hit 2 to 3 mics or shows and go to bed. And I would have been like, if I could do that every day, I'm like so happy. That's what I want to be doing. And I really was like happy on the road to that. And I was like going to my day job as part of the process to become a comedian because like I need to feed and clothe and house myself in the meantime. Like I love feeling like busy. I love feeling productive. I love to bop and I love to like get on stage a couple of times and I've seen a bunch of people and I'm like, obviously I don't want to be doing open mics for the rest of my life, but I am like, if these are the things I get to do every day, then I've had a really good day, even though they're not necessarily like success indicators. But I feel like I'm lucky in that I've always like kind of been able to walk myself off a ledge by being like, even if I'm not where I want to be, I know I'm on the road to it.
Right. Absolutely.
And so this was a quote I actually saved for my friend who was having a hard time turning 30, because I do think it's there's always a milestone that you haven't hit yet that you can be unhappy someone else hit faster. But it is like, if you're happy every day working towards that, like you should be happy on the road to the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, I agree with all of that. And I really liked the exercise she had around that of coming up with 10 things that bring you joy and finding ways to incorporate that into your day every day. Like finding ways to incorporate things you're going to be grateful that you did. So you start your day with like a 10 on energy and doing things throughout the day to protect your energy, but also to, I forget what the word was, activate or amplify your energy. And it makes me wonder, like listening to you, what's your vision now? Like, what do you see if you're laying out, like she talks a lot about what you're grateful for, what you're proud of, and then like the vision.
I definitely feel like we do a Patreon. I love that. I like feel proud. Like the thing that I want to get back to is this idea of like immersing myself in the city. I love to read. That feels so corny, but it's something that I'm like, I feel like for a while I lost how much I love to read because I was reading so much stuff that I didn't like. And I've really been making an effort to read. And I was like, oh, I forgot that I like love to read a good book. And I feel like I have thoughts on it. And like, I do like to discuss pop culture and hot topics like in a thoughtful way. And I like to have done so in a researched way. And I feel like, especially with the pop culture can become so alt-right. Like it's such a pipeline. And I feel like offering a more compassionate, critical lens of like women in pop culture, especially like right now with Rachel Zegler, she's being blamed for the downfall of Snow White because she posted pro-Palestine 8 months ago. And that's like clearly not what's happening.
Literally people are being so clear that they're boycotting the movie because of Gal Gadot.
And because I think it sucks. Like in a very small off to the side moment they go, of course it did reshoot 3 times and the reviews have been bad, as if that has nothing to do with its bombing. I'm like, I don't know, it was, do you know what I mean? Like
and a lot of these live action Disney movies bomb.
Exactly. So I would love to like be able to talk about, put context like that into it. I think that I mean, but it's even the daily, like I like commuting to work. I like I like biking to work every day. Oh,
that's interesting. That's huge to know that. Like I love working from home. Some people love going to work.
I like the Jay Shetty book that was the worst version of this that made me so mad was he was really like shaming people who buy a coffee every day and claim they need it, but meanwhile won't spend an extra $1.50 on healthy food. And he's like, is this really aligning with your values? And I was like, buying a coffee every day is actually so aligned with my values. Because I love feeling like a local. I love a neighborhood. It's really important to know my neighbors. It's really important to me to like make sure I have people that I see every day in a casual way. Now that I don't really have coworkers, I really love that feeling of having people that you see like in a low level basis. I don't know if you've ever read Jane Jacobs' book about like American neighborhoods. I don't know why I'm blanking, but she's a urban planner, and something she talks a lot about is the trust that neighbors have in each other, and the idea that like if you have a bodega guy that you see 2 to 3 times a week, you might like be like, hey, I have a friend coming by, could you hold on to keys for them? And like you might really trust them in a way that you might trust a friend. And like if you had a kid, and I'm someone who thinks about having a kid in New York, I feel like my coffee shop people, if I were to ever have a child who got lost, I'm like, I know I can count on them to like help that kid. And I really believe that those relationships are important. And I'm like, and I would pay $3.50 every day for the rest of my life to like,
it's community,
and like to make sure the businesses get to thrive and stuff.
And it also, even on a personal level, like some of these self-help books would argue that giving yourself a treat every day can actually do more for your abundance mindset by letting yourself believe that you deserve that.
Yeah.
Like, self-help book club. We're thinking, you know,
What was my
vision
dream?
board.
I mean, it would be
dream.
it'd be like I'd be talking about 4 or 5 things I consumed. Everything from like not podcasts, but like reality TV, down to a play I saw, and then like interview a musician. You know what I mean? I'd love
like a
to
tastemaker. Like this
yeah,
is
just
what.
be like, here's 5 things that I've really loved, and I don't know, to help people get off their phones. I feel like engage, read,
Yeah.
even watch a full TV show.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely, I'm thinking of like, I was a little unplugged myself. I didn't realize at first, like, how big your podcast had gotten until I was like, I worked at a marketing agency, and some girlies at work, all of a sudden, they're all like asking me if I know you because we're like mutuals. And they were like, oh my God. They're like, she's so like her and like Claire and Ashley, they're so funny. They're so like, I feel like they're my friends. I love, like they really, I know from like talking to these ladies that how much they trust your point of view and how much they're listening and appreciating what y'all have to say. So I can't imagine, like, literally, I mean, they would be so happy to know that I'm like speaking for them right now. But they would like literally, if you told them to, like, not something bad, but
No, but if I recommended a book, they might
if
read
you
it. That would be my hope.
I was like, if you told them to convert to,
Or things like even things that I feel like I take for granted just because like I'm in New York and I feel like I remember seeing a lot of people order stuff from Temu, and I'm like, Temu literally uses slave labor. And I think a lot of people just don't know that. And so like, I don't know, I would love to use my podcast to talk about Summer House and then a book I'm reading and then like, an expose on Temu and just be like, by the way, if you didn't already know.
yeah, it's almost like it's a whole, I'm thinking of like, remember when Oprah like stopped doing the show?
Yeah.
That was a big moment. And it was like, what's Oprah going to do now? And then Oprah got a website. Oprah got a magazine. Oprah has a TV network.
Yeah.
And there's a whole world of Oprah outside of Oprah's book club, outside of Oprah's talk show. And of course, Oprah's a billionaire.
Maybe we all, the dream. Am I right?
Yeah. But like,
I'm going to buy Hawaii next.
That's like a different level. But it does feel like once people know who you are, and all of this is in the realm of like, it's lifestyle. I see it.
Thank you. Hopefully, yeah. Fingers crossed. Do you want to hear the other 2 quotes that I resonated with?
Please.
Every day after you've written your gratitude list, you should also make a self-gratitude list, writing down all the things you did well that day. It's a moment to do something rare, to appreciate yourself. Journal entry by journal entry, you're rewiring your thoughts to not depend on others for validation. And I actually was like, that feels like, I like know people that would be hugely helpful for.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other ones. Have you wished for what you truly want? If not, take a second to ponder why. Could it be that you, like the villagers, have asked for what you think is possible instead of what you truly desire? When it comes to your career, to say that you want an ox when what you really want is enlightenment, do you pine for a promotion when what you really want is meaning?
Oh, yeah, I love that.
And I think, like, the whole story there is, like, somebody's talking to Buddha, and they're like, and Buddha goes, anybody could find true enlightenment. And they go, well, not anybody, you're special. And he goes, ask anybody in the village what they want. And he comes back, he goes, well, everybody wants an ox. And he goes, exactly how you're supposed to find enlightenment when what you're saying you want isn't, like, the problem is these people are saying they don't even want it.
Right.
But it's because they don't think they could.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And she talked a lot more about, a lot of these books reference Buddhism, but they don't go into as much detail. And she was telling the story of Siddhartha being like a rich prince and going out into the world and discovering suffering and wanting to end suffering. And so he kind of was like the original, like rich, like Nepo guy, like writing a self-help book. Mm-hmm. But he surrendered everything to enlightenment. And it's like, it seems like all these books, they say it in a different way, but it's like, what are your priorities? What do you really care about? Because there's so much noise coming at us. And it's so distracting. And you can so easily get caught up like pursuing someone else's dream and to let yourself really do what you want to do. And if that's for you, like reviewing more books, but different books, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Literally, like, it's like the idea that everyone has their own little story and to let yours be unique, like let it be your own path. It's kind of, it's a liberating idea that it makes me understand why a lot of people are connecting with self-help. Like, trust yourself.
I think a lot of people are not exposed to this idea that it could be you.
Right.
And I feel like, so I told you I read that Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and something that I wanted to, it's crack. I mean, like, crock of shit, bullshit, horrible, evil man. It is essentially a pyramid scheme for boys. That's very like, it has these designs in it that don't make any fucking, like, it is like a horrible, evil book. But I will say, I do believe that people who were raised without much economic or financial knowledge, like no personal finance knowledge, who have been like systemically fucked over, like the first step to anything is believing that you can. And I will say, like, I do think that book was the most readily accessible book. It's very like kind of alpha male, like, you can do it, follow these 3 easy steps. And even though following his 3 easy steps would probably lead you to financial ruin, if hopefully in reading that book you go, oh, I could do this, and then you read a second book,
Right.
or even just like you look up over, like, you have to believe that you could before you can do anything.
Right. Yeah, like to let yourself take the steps.
And I think, yeah, and I think that a lot of times, even if a book does just that, gives you the idea that like it could be you. That is the first step that you have to take. Self-help book club.